Shut up and sit down.
Hey, what's going on? Beer Today, Beer Tomorrow is back with episode 28 featuring Transmitter Brewing of Long Island City, Queens. Transmitter brews beers with a focus on traditional and farmhouse ales. They have secured over 20 strains of Brettanomyces, Lactobacillus, and Pediococcus, as well as a brewhouse library of traditional Belgian, French, English, and American yeasts. Their mission is to leverage their passion and introduce craft beer heads to compelling and unique beers with an appreciation of their history and a focus on the quality of ingredients. Today's episode features a sit-down with owners Anthony Accardi and Rob Kolb. Crack a brew and enjoy the show. Cheers. Beer Today, Beer Tomorrow is very excited to be here at Transmitter Brewery, located at 5302 11th Street, Long Island City, Queens, New York, 11101, right under the Pulaski Bridge. Transmitter is an urban farmhouse brewery specializing in farmhouse-style ales with a focus on French and Belgian-style beers and barrel-aged sours. Joining me today is longtime co-host Pete and BTBT goon Justin. Welcome back to another show, gentlemen. How you guys doing?
What's going on? How are you guys doing?
Hey, what's going on?
Pretty good, pretty good. And our special guests today are Transmitter co-founders Rob Kolb and Anthony Accardi. This is Anthony's second appearance on the podcast. His first was back in May of this year during episode 19, the Queens Beer Week warm-up event at the Pony Bar in Manhattan. Anthony, it's a pleasure to have you back again. And
Thanks for coming out.
Absolutely. And Rob, welcome to the show for the first time. We're really glad you could join us here today to talk about one of our favorite things in life, and one of yours as well, I'm sure, beer. And for the context of today's conversation, more specifically today is all about your beer. Guys, how you doing?
Good to be here.
Perfect. So, getting right into it. So how did you guys initially get into brewing?
I think Anthony started way before any of us, some time ago, home brewing.
I started homebrewing in the early 90s.
Okay.
Then Rob and I started homebrewing together probably, I don't know, it's probably been 7 years ago now.
Wow.
We
It's creeping up on us.
yeah, we homebrewed together for 3 years and decided we'd try to make a go of it here.
Okay.
All right, very cool. So at what point did you guys decide, you know what, this is something we want to take a step beyond homebrewing? Was it that moment where it was like, you know what, this is what we want to do? I mean, how did that all come together?
We threatened each other, and the landscape of brewing in New York City was much different 4 years ago. It was like 4.5 years ago when we started looking for a spot, and there was only a handful of breweries, and it just seemed like with 8.5 million people that live here, that New York was really starved for a brewery, for local beer, and it definitely has exploded in the last couple of years.
Absolutely.
But that was the first sort of impetus to us looking to open a brewery.
Well, yeah, you guys came up in a time when, especially in Queens, I mean, the craft beer scene exploded here. A few years ago, there was nothing, and now we're in the double digits. So what would you say influenced your fondness for the particular styles that you guys brew?
It's what we like to drink generally. We also felt that there was certainly a hole that could be filled by the styles that we want to brew. Everyone was and is sort of riding the IPA train, which
Right.
is totally cool and delicious and great. It felt like that's a hard nut to crack, just in terms of more and more IPAs and fighting for placement, and from a marketing standpoint, we felt like there was some value in being focused and sort of a niche brewery in terms of presenting ourselves and having a cohesive sort of brand and idea behind the brand, in terms of and we stray from that a little bit here and there, but it does help us when we present beer. It feels like it gives us some level of authority, which I think is helpful in the world of beer. Now we're up to, I don't know, like 5,800 breweries open in the U.S. today. I mean, 5,600, something close to that.
Sure.
With still another 2,000 in planning. So
Jesus Christ.
even we're certainly in 2013 we started Transmitter. We didn't open till 2014, but even then it was still probably half what it is today. So
It was sub 3,000.
yeah, it was. I feel
Wow.
like in end of 2013, we were still looking at 2,700 or 3,000 breweries. So doubling the breweries, it's cool. It's great. Like there's all this stuff on shelves and on taps and all
Right.
that, and that's amazing. And I think the tide is rising all the boats, but there's still some level of, but it's a lot of beer.
Right.
Yeah.
It's a lot of votes.
A lot of votes.
So, what did you guys do prior to Transmitter as a brewery?
So I worked in theatrical advertising.
Okay, this is quite the change.
Quite the change, but whether you're selling a Broadway show or a car or a bottle of beer, it's still marketing and advertising. So,
Okay.
I went to art school. I opened a photo lab, custom photo lab here in New York, and did that for the first 25 years of my
Wow.
life.
Okay.
And,
Jeez.
after school, and then we chose to start this. And for the first year, we both worked nights and weekends, so kept our day jobs. I came on full time first, and then Rob followed after that.
Awesome. You guys have never made an IPA?
No.
Never. Wow.
No. We make a few hoppy beers.
Right.
But nothing I would distinctly call an IPA. Certainly not in terms of the modern IPA that you would expect.
Right.
Well, it's kind of refreshing, right? Because there's certainly a oversaturation of IPAs. I mean, I'm a big IPA fan, but I mean, they're everywhere. And obviously, not all IPAs are created equally. But I think that, like you said, it's like that niche market that you guys are in. You guys are almost like an alternative. And I like it, even though we're big
you guys
hop
stand
heads,
out,
but
especially in the neighborhood with everything you have around here. I think the only other one maybe would be Descendant, right?
oh yeah, Descendant, their cider spot. Yeah.
Right.
So, what would you guys say is most challenging aspect of opening up a brewery in New York?
real estate.
Yeah, absolutely.
Absolutely number one. It's the reason why there's not 100 breweries in New York City. If you think about other cities, how many breweries per capita? 30 breweries for 8 million people is, it's a huge. You can't even. Yeah, doing business in New York City is really expensive.
Yeah.
New York presents a host of challenges because it's a brewery. It's actually manufacturing, so you have to find the right zoning. You can't be just anywhere. But of course, as a brewery now, the business model is to have a tasting room. That's how small breweries succeed.
Sure.
So, so you need manufacturing, but you need to be close to people. You need to have access to the brewery to make that happen. So, that Venn diagram of trying to find both manufacturing and close to people that are willing to come to the brewery is pretty small.
That you can afford.
Right.
Right.
And this neighborhood's not cheap.
It is not. No, I mean LIC, Greenpoint, but surprisingly, it was one of the best neighborhoods we looked in. Clearly breweries always go to edges, essentially. They, you want to look at places that are just outside of where the towers are.
Right.
So, because of where we are, across the train tracks, underneath the bridge, like it's sort of definitely a funky area.
Right.
But it's also close to people. The 7 train is, 500 meters away around
Right.
the corner.
Yeah.
Super close. Like people get off that and they can walk right around. The bridge that we're underneath has a staircase down so that people from Greenpoint and Williamsburg, while they're walking across the bridge, can drop right down to our doorstep. And
Wow.
that was really
Awesome.
oddly critical in our early success.
Great.
That's pretty cool. So while you guys were in the process of setting up the brewery, I mean, obviously real estate was a big issue. Were there other challenges, bumps in the road that kind of occurred during the whole process?
I don't know about bumps in the road. Anthony's run his own business for 25 years before this, so the running the business aspect, keeping books and payroll and accounts payable, receivable, and all that stuff, sort of he had a really good handle on that. So it made it easy actually opening a business. Our biggest challenge has always been capital. We're self-funded and didn't take any investors to open Transmitter. So we've always been sort of scrappy, to reinvest into the brewery. That's probably the biggest sort of growing pain.
That embodies the craft beer spirit.
In some ways, or you can get a big loan and some investors and open a big brewery.
There you go.
Right. and still be craft beer. I mean,
it's
Boston
not.
Brewery is still considered craft beer, so
There's all different.
there's a long way up.
Sure.
So no arguments like throughout these years, or like any fights, fist fights?
No.
No fist fights.
No.
No, it's
I
only
mean,
it's only beer.
We're pretty chill. I mean, it's,
So how did you guys come up with the name? Any story behind that?
Naming a business is both easy and difficult. You're trying to find something meaningful. We chose Transmitter because we both happen to live in Greenpoint. We actually thought we could open the brewery within Greenpoint, and
Right.
so we named it after Transmitter Park down at the end of Greenpoint Ave. We liked it. We thought it was a good name for a brewery, and we were looking there, and we had incorporated, and still looking for the place that we're going to move to. There was no place in Greenpoint for us. Real estate there is crazy, and
Crazier,
Wow.
right?
yeah, crazier. So my wife walks over the bridge to go to work, and saw a sign down here for sublet on this space, and came and looked at it, and it was rough but interesting. It seemed like, again, worth pursuing, and the landlord was interested in us, and so it worked out well. But the name is literally about Transmitter Park in Greenpoint.
Do you remember the story behind how they got the name, the Transmitter Park?
Transmitter Park is named after WNYC moved a radio tower there in the late 30s or early 40s, and so essentially they had a radio tower in Manhattan. As buildings got taller, it was starting to interfere with the signal, so they moved it off of the island to the edge of Brooklyn. There's still a building there with a transmission building, essentially. They had two very large towers that were state-of-the-art at the time, and those towers have since been taken down, but so it was a WNYC broadcasting site, essentially.
Cool.
Wow, yeah. So what is your production volume like here?
I mean, we're doing 800 barrels, 1,000 hectoliters a year.
Nice. And you guys right now, it's just bottles, right?
No, we do about half and half
Okay.
kegs for beer bars and beer-centric places, restaurants.
You guys just don't have taps here.
Right.
Exactly.
Correct, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
So there's
why
a
you
lot
call
of
it a tasting
complication.
room.
Yeah, I mean it's not worth describing the issues, but essentially we had pressure to not put taps in early, and we thought that was fine. So our tasting room is 3 small samples of beer for free. People come in and get a couple ounces of 3 different beers.
Oh wow.
When they walk in, they get like a description of each. It's not a flight per se. They stand in our little tasting room and get sort of walk through it. And then people are welcome to buy bottles to go or hang out at these German picnic tables. So the weekends, we get a decent number of people, and people are sharing bottles, and we're doing. We started with mostly 750s in bottling, cork and cage. Now we've moved to more 500, so we have kind of a split between. We still do some 750s and 500, so we're finding that people can split a 500 and still enjoy it,
Right.
or drink it themselves without feeling overwhelmed on a Saturday afternoon.
All right. So how many different beers are you guys currently making?
We don't do any flagships, so over 100 different beers.
Wow.
Oh, wow.
In active production, probably 70.
Can you name them all?
I could if you want to.
What's interesting is the naming convention. We don't name our beers. We have a letter number designation.
Right.
Right.
So the letter represents the style, and the number is the beer. It's
So-
not iterative. So S2 isn't a better version of S1.
S1,
It's
right.
each number is a distinct beer, and when you drink S4, it's always that beer.
Like
essentially.
S4 here, it's going to be our Saison.
Yep. We call this classic Saison. Clean, straightforward, very drinkable, effervescent, a little fruity, a little spicy.
This is nice on a warm day.
Oh,
Yeah, nice and
That's for
dry.
sure, yeah.
Absolutely.
The,
So actually, I could sit here and name every
Yeah.
one. It wouldn't be that hard,
luckily
you know?
for us, it's just a list: S1, S2, S3, S4, S5. G1, G2, G3, G4, G5.
Very easy, very easy.
So yeah.
So I mean, obviously you guys are proud of all your beers, but are there any particular beers you guys have done that have really stood out in recent memory, where you're like, wow, our beers are good, but this one's something else?
It's interesting. I think we often say the last beer we have is the best beer of any batch. And since we bottle condition every single bottle of beer we do, the beers continually develop in the bottle, and the extra time in most of our beers really change them in some way. So it's usually like one of the last bottles we have is like what I'm like
of any given
of any
batch.
given batch.
Yeah.
that I'm really like, oh, this is awesome. It's-
We're unusually patient with fermentation and bottle conditioning. That's like one of our attributes and strengths. We, because of the bottle conditioning, it's imperative to us that we let beer ferment fully. Otherwise, we end up with problems in the bottles. So, where many breweries will, ferment an IPA for 10 days and then can it, we don't really ferment anything for less than about 21 days.
Okay.
And we have plenty of beers that go much, much longer. 3 weeks, 4 weeks, 5 weeks, 6 weeks, and then there are beers that go 7, 8, 10 months, 12 months.
Wow.
So it's certainly for the general beer scene, that's a bit unusual, and in some ways, as you asked earlier, like what's difficult, where are the speed bumps? Like our attention to time is something that costs us money and energy,
production.
and that's hard. With the size brewery we have, if we were doing straight IPAs, we could probably be making triple the amount of beer that we are.
Wow.
Maybe 4 times the amount of beer. A huge increase in production.
Right.
We'd still rather do what we do and be known for that. So, that's a complicated matrix of like time, and we do faster beers, which to us means, at the shortest, like 10 weeks probably before from grain
just talking about
to
fermentation.
yeah,
Not even
from
packaging.
grain to selling a beer. The fastest beer we make is somewhere between 8 and 10 weeks.
Wow.
Whereas, a brewery that makes an IPA in a can do that in, 10, 11, 12 days.
Wow.
And for our beers, what we do is better for it. For their beers, what they do is better for
Right.
it. Right? I mean, it's not there's room for both, and but it's New York City, and that time does cost something. You know?
Yeah. I mean, speaking of time, especially in the beginning, and I'm sure now still, I mean, how did you guys balance work and, personal time?
Personal time?
Is there such a thing?
Not owning a business in New York City. I mean, if you have a weekend off, great. If there's something going on, you got to go do it.
Sure.
Yeah, I mean, the only way to balance it is have a much bigger brewery and have staff. And,
Right.
that's what we're working towards.
Is it currently just you guys?
We say there are essentially 5 full-time people.
Okay.
And that's broken out in sort of an unusual way. On bottling day, we need 5 people here to help bottle, and so that accounts for 20 person hours essentially. So that's half a full-time person. So really, it's 3 full-time people and then a handful of part-time people, ranging anywhere from 3 to 8 hours a week.
Okay.
So, but it accounts for about 5 full-time people hours.
Right. So basically, you guys work a lot.
We work a lot.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, our schedule now is Rob and I switch weekends, so we're always here one of us is always here during tasting room hours. So it's basically 12 days on and 2 days off.
Wow.
Wow.
Jesus.
Wow. And then you guys are probably at events or
Yeah,
industry
and then
stuff.
right, and then it's certainly random stuff where we need both of us need to be somewhere, whether it's
Here and somewhere
here at the tasting room and somewhere else at a festival, or we don't do a ton of those because of how much we work at this point.
Mhm.
Right.
But there are festivals that we're interested in doing, and so we're there.
So tell us about you guys. You guys have a CSB program, right? So can you tell the audience a little bit about what that is and how they could,
Yeah, we call it community supported brewing, same as the CSA, except instead of getting a bag full of stuff that you might not ever use, you get to come here and choose your beer. So you pay for 6 months of beer up front, and you get 2 or 3 bottles, depending on the size of the bottle you're taking, as well as some swag. And one of the cool things about it is you get pretty good discount on any additional bottles you purchase. The way we do it, it's all round numbers, so it works out to be like almost 15% discount on any additional bottle.
Oh, nice.
So if you're local and you come a lot, it's great, save some money. If you in the city and you come once a month like a lot of our members do, it's a fun way to make you kind of come out, support the brewery, and kind of get out of your apartment,
Yeah.
have fun,
Yeah, sure.
taste some beer,
Make an
hang
event
out.
out of it.
Yeah.
We certainly have very loyal people that have joined, and we're constantly, people disappear and new people come in, but there has been probably a core set of, I'd say, 40 people that have been with us from nearly the beginning, essentially, or are on their 2nd, 3rd, or 4th CSB. And it works super well. We love to see them, and we're glad that they're a part of it and that they support us so deeply that they, some people are quite close, obviously, but other people are coming from, or we have a few people that drive over, from Jersey and upstate New York and
Wow.
Long Island, or even, decided they were going to join and come out once a month from other parts of the city, whether it's, New York or the Bronx or Staten Island or wherever. So it's been a fun addition, and it's nice those are people that we tend to know their names and we see them, and that's always a pleasure.
Kind of become like family.
Absolutely.
Big Transmitter family.
Yeah. It's like they're, in a way, it's like they're a part of the brewery. That's
Yep.
really cool.
Now, can you tell us about the design on the bottles? This looks really slick here. Does somebody else do this, or?
We have a friend who's really Jeff Rogers, who's a world-class designer, and we named it Transmitter. He found visual reference to something called a QSL card, which is ham radio operators would send each other a postcard after they made radio contact, and the postcards were designed in a way that they were usually printed with their call letters, and then they filled in by hand or typewriter information about their equipment and personal information about their contact they made. And so for us, it gave us a way to both tie it into Transmitter which made sense in terms of conceptually, like radio kind of thing.
Yeah.
But it also gave us a way in to provide people with a lot of information about it, the beer. That was important to us. We want people to be able to pick up a bottle and read about the beer and the tasting notes in a way. The worst thing that can happen is that someone picks up a bottle of Transmitter and it's not a style or something that they potentially don't like, and then they buy it and don't like it. I'd rather be upfront about it and let them know what's in their hand and choose the beer based on their flavor and preferences. So basically all that layered information helps the consumer and describes what the beer is, so no one's surprised. I mean, we're drinking S4. This is really easy, totally drinkable, very straightforward. But we do have beers that are more challenging, for sure, that not everyone is going to necessarily like. Sour beers, funky beers, barnyardy, crazy stuff happening in it that really is made for a subset of beer drinkers in general, or wine drinkers.
Could you elaborate on what are some of the more funkier beers you guys have done?
Everything from some crazy sour stuff that could spend 2 years in a barrel or a year in bottles. All different wild yeast and bacteria, whether it's lactobacillus or pediococcus. We do a beer with 3 strains of Brett that starts off super funky, barnyardy, horse blanket, and we cellar it for a minimum of 6 to 8 months before we even release it.
Wow.
And then after that time, it changes into another beer. It's all these funky beers are all over the place in the beginning, so they're just like living things that keep changing.
So our F series beers are essentially saisons in sort of underlying style, and they always have wild yeast in them. So they're not spontaneously fermented. We're not using a cool ship, but they're inoculated with Brettanomyces. Depending on the beer, sometimes it's single, double, or triple strains of Brett. So those tend to be on the cutting edge of flavor in terms of funkiness and fruitiness and grassiness and things that are hard to describe in words because it sounds undrinkable.
Yeah.
But once you actually put it in a glass and smell it and taste it, that can be an incredible experience.
So you're saying horse blanket's not a good marketing term?
It depends on who you're marketing.
Yeah.
That's true. Absolutely.
The H series are our slowest beers generally. Those we call harvests. They always have fruit in them. Those start fermentation in a red wine barrel. Spend somewhere between 6 and 11 months in a wine barrel. We add a couple pounds per gallon of various fruits. H1 is Zinfandel grapes, H2 is Chardonnay grapes, H4 is Italian plums, H5 is apricots. So those are very slow beers for us to make, the slowest beers to make, and those represent sort of the pinnacle of our craft in a way. Oaky, fruity, funky, barnyardy, like all sorts of layers going on, and sour, and they can we find that those are interesting beers for wine drinkers, essentially. People that often go right to wine will love those beers. There's enough grape and interest in them in that way that we find that people really gravitate towards them.
This was the H series, you
the
said.
H, yep.
Okay.
So it sounds like those are some of your most, I guess, the beers you have some of the most fun with, right?
Yeah, because it's always the H is always harvest, so there's always a fruit involved, and it's always a slow sour. There's a couple different ways to sour beer, but that's generally soured in wood that's inoculated with different strains of bacteria and yeast, and just takes a really long time. So you get to really watch these beers develop over time, and sort of nothing replaces that. There's no fast way to do that. There's fast way to sour beer, which is kettle souring beer. We do that as well, and but it's sort of much less not complicated, much less.
Less straightforward.
Yeah.
Do you prefer one method over the other?
No, just different.
Yeah.
I mean, different ends to a means.
Yeah, different goals. Kettle sours for us and for many people, I think of as being very pointed, like very focused and citrusy, like lemony, very sharp acidity that way. And that sort of comes to you, you taste the sourness, and then it disappears, essentially. Right. And those are generally Gozas and Berliner Weisses, fruited sours. And that's certainly out in the commercial world, that's a huge part of the market, Westbrook Goza and
right.
Anderson Valley, and all those are kettle sours. Totally lovely beers, like relatively inexpensive, very drinkable. Bright acidity, so the other side of that, of building a beer is that slow style, which, as I said, takes between 8 and 24 months, essentially. And that has like a much more profound and round sourness, where there's a lot more layers to it. There's the acidity isn't quite so sharp. You get oakiness from it because of the way we're fermenting it, which doesn't present in the kettle side sour.
Okay.
It's a different animal, and there's a place for both, for sure. It's not one is better than the other. Mm-hmm. That would be a hard call. You may prefer one over the other.
Right,
but
goes on to preference.
Yeah.
You guys have to be patient to wait that long for a beer. Holy shit.
You have other beers to drink along the way. So.
Yeah, I hope so. Fuck. 8 to 24 months.
Wow.
So the beer that we're drinking now is almost a year old.
Wow. This is the F4.
This is the F4,
right?
3 strains of wild yeast. And it's fermented in stainless for, I think it's 12 weeks.
Yeah, about 3 months. Yep.
12 weeks in stainless, and then another, minimum 8 months in bottle condition.
Wow.
So these beers continue to evolve in the bottle, which is what's cool about them.
Is there any one of these that you like the most?
No.
They're all our babies,
Yeah.
You can't, Sophie's choice. You can't pick one.
What about your wives?
That's a good. That's a great question.
Tanya's S1.
All right,
There you go. That was easy.
Tanya's S1.
S1 is we call it mahogany saison. We ferment it with yeast that's cultured off the skin of a blueberry, so wild yeast. But it's we don't. Again, we're not spontaneously inoculating. We're using it with intent, and it's a strain of Saccharomyces, so it's not Brettanomyces that gives it its sort of earthy funkiness. It's a delicious beer. People love it a lot. So you could think of it as being almost leaning into like a porter,
Oh,
but
nice.
with
Okay.
saison/wild edge to it. So it's dry. It's got like a little bit of chocolatey coffee note, but subtle, like less so than a porter, and certainly not as strong as a stout.
Right.
And dry, super drinkable. It's got the yeast lends it a really nice mouthfeel. There's I think the yeast is leaving some glycerol, which gives it sort of fullness in the mouth, which is interesting against something that's so dry, essentially.
Right.
Like, we're playing with sort of extremes of dryness and mouthfeel, and like the ABV is a little bit elevated for saison. It's like, if I recall correctly, it's like around 7.1%.
Wow.
So it's got some robust alcohol to it too, which I think of as having, like 7% alcohol as having sort of a really nice fruitiness that does something interesting to the beer and how it sort of plays out in your mouth.
So when you guys are brewing, do you guys ever have, you ever think about, do you ever have in the back of your mind pairing it with a meal, pairing it with food as you're brewing these beers?
Certainly our beers, we love our beers to be served next to food. I mean, we think that they stand on their own, obviously, as beer, but we are interested in nuance and delicacy, which, an IPA isn't necessarily interested in. So we find ourselves certainly marketing to restaurants as a goal. In a lot of ways, some of our beers can take the place of champagne. Some of them can take the place of wine. They're meant to be delicious and subtle and nuanced without overwhelming food, and that I think fits in well with our underlying sort of reference to the traditional beers that we're making.
Sure.
H series sounds like it would go really nice with
Super well.
fish or something. Yeah, I'm so hungry. I'm sorry.
But no, on the fish is you really want the kettle sour, like the dry hop kettle sour stuff. That stuff and shellfish is like.
W4 is dry hop kettle sour. It uses Motueka as a dry hop, which gives it really nice sort of lime peel to the beer, like very robust sort of liminess, floral liminess to it. And next to like oysters, it is fucking beautiful.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, it's
Like,
it's really,
There was some passion
it's fixing
behind
my
that.
head, you know?
Yeah, I'm getting hungry now too.
It's got some
Oh my God.
saltiness, some salinity that's really
Right.
nice.
It's so we make it pretty sour, but we add enough salt to it that it adds like a roundness and sort of pushes the acidity down a little bit. So you
Okay.
get like a lemony acidity and then a salty brininess. Again, like just it fits perfectly with a plate of oysters. It's
man.
cool.
Killing me right
Yeah,
now.
and it's interesting. I think a lot of people just assume that when drinking, it's wine that pairs well with food, and wine does. But in many ways, beer actually is a better counterpart for food. I mean, there's so many more different complexities and the depth to the beer. So that is interesting that you guys do have that in your mind when you're brewing.
Yeah, wine is it's interesting because wine clearly pairs well with food, but you can make a mistake with a wine pairing, and that mistake doesn't happen the same way with beer. Like, it's much harder to pair beer with food and make a bad choice. Like, it's an easier pairing, like generally. It's hard. It's much harder to go wrong with a beer food pairing than it is a wine food pairing.
In fact, they say cheese and wine are one of the hardest pairings to do, and cheese and beer are one of the easiest pairings.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
And that's cheesemongers that we've worked with have often said that to us. Like, wine is sort of very focused. Like beer's got all these different things, but the carbonation really helps with cheese. Kind of cleans your tongue, cleans your palate, where wine sort of lingers. Sort of, if it doesn't work well together, it makes it really bad. Where sort of beer sort of cleans that palate.
Well, it's interesting, right? Like our artisanal cheese makers, they're somewhat similar to craft beer makers. I think both of them obviously they're a labor of passion, labor of love, and I think, I agree. I think beer and cheese is a phenomenal pairing.
Spite and Dival after this?
Yeah, Spite and Dival after everything.
Say hello to Alex for us.
Yeah. So do you guys have any new releases coming up that you want to talk about?
We've always, making new stuff, but I think I'm looking at the release board. I mean, the Apricot Goza that's out right now is one of our really all-time, not favorites, but I mean,
It's beautiful beer. W6, Apricot Goza. Like we're not afraid to lean into the minerality of the beer, so we add enough salt to it that it feels salty. Of course, social media, sometimes there's always someone like not salty enough, but that's okay. And when we make a fruity beer, we add a solid amount of fruit to it. So that Goza has probably close to 2 pounds per gallon of apricot.
oh, per gallon, sorry.
Yeah. And super solidly like apricot nose, still dry, like not sweet. We don't leave any residual sugar in the fermentation process. And then it finishes with like a really nice salty sort of apricot, fuzzy apricot skin that feel that is really quite beautiful.
Wow.
Do you get some of your? Do you try to get a lot of your ingredients when you can locally? As far as locally as New York State.
Yeah.
We tried to get apricots last year, and there was the crop failed for apricots.
Oh, wow.
There was a late frost, whatever it was. So they weren't selling any wholesale apricots. This year we didn't have time, to reach out. Eventually we'd love to do more local stuff, but it's hard because it's not like a couple 100 pounds; it's 1,000 pounds.
Right.
As we get bigger, it's a couple thousand pounds.
Right.
Yeah, there's so right now, as much as anything, it's kind of just purely production logistics issue where we're not making that much beer and the timing is very difficult. As we expand, that timing window will spread out a little bit for us because we'll have more beer in production at any given moment. And we'll be able to wait a little longer for fruit to come into season. We have beer now that's in a red wine barrel that's waiting for the grape harvest. So that's coming up any minute.
We always do local grapes. Not local, we get them locally.
But they're California grapes, so we get those in harvest. That's the H1 that we just described.
Right.
Chardonnay grape. Zinfandel grape in that one.
So we'll go to a wine supply store and get them seeded and crushed and stemmed. Add them to the beer.
Awesome.
Very
Any
cool.
events you guys have coming up?
What do we have coming up?
Sour in September next week.
Right, Sour in September at Captain Lawrence's next week. The week after that, we have an event in Jersey City at the Archer, which is
2 weeks after.
2 weeks? Yeah. Beer bar, that's hosting us there. Full tap takeover. They have 6 taps, so
Oh, nice.
we'll pull out some. We pulled out some funky stuff for that.
And then the Blocktoberfest, which is the New York City Craft Brewers Guild, all the local breweries do that in October.
That's a big one.
That's a big one. The
Blocktoberfest.
Yeah, that's a great event.
You guys have a date for that yet?
There is a date. I don't know it.
Hey, don't worry, we'll find it.
Yeah.
We'll be there.
We'll
It's
Google it.
October.
We'll Google
It's
it.
like October 15, 16.
Okay.
Around there.
Yeah, mid-October.
Mid-October at the well.
14th maybe
cool.
at the well. Like
Nice.
great venue.
In the back, it's rain or shine. It's awesome. It rained last year because it's October,
Of course.
and it was
Yeah.
packed. It was
Wow.
great, well attended.
Yeah. The Blocktoberfest tends to be a pretty amazing event. We start with all New York City breweries pouring some of their best beers. So it's a New York City guild event essentially. It's a
Right.
fundraiser. So it's good to we are part of the guild, and we love to support it and make sure that people know about it, and we get the beer geeks, and hopefully it extends past
Last
that.
year it was definitely not just beer geeks. It was a bunch of people from Brooklyn, Manhattan coming in just to drink good beer and
Awesome.
check out the New York City beer scene.
So
Very cool.
Very cool. So speaking of, so when you guys are not drinking your beer, is there any, what kind of beer are you guys drinking?
Pilsner.
Pilsner?
I really love funky wine. I like orange wine.
Okay.
Yeah. So
Wow.
I sort of search out some funky orange wine, naturally fermented. I think it helps my brain.
Yeah. I tell the wife the same thing when I drink.
Well, people drop off bottles or cans all the time, and we'll drink. We don't care.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's all just beer at the end of the day.
Exactly.
Exactly.
Right.
Exactly.
With that said, when is the last time either one of you had a Bud or a Coors?
Oh man.
Oh man. Let's see.
Anthony.
I'm not.
I think I know
totally
the
not
answer to the
adverse.
first time you had one.
Anthony, what? It's Miller. No.
The Miller.
The Miller. Yeah.
We have a beer actually called F6 that the story behind it is I went to a rental house during the summer upstate, got there on a Friday afternoon. There was one beer in the fridge. It was Miller High Life in a
Oh,
bottle.
God.
It was beautiful. I drank it. It was one of the best beers I've ever experienced.
At the moment.
At that moment.
Sure.
And
Fair enough.
so F6 is one of our farmhouse beers. So designed that recipe around the idea of Coors, and not trying to mimic Coors or make Coors at all. Like
Right.
that's not the premise. But one of the things I noticed was there was a really light, corny sweetness to it, which their adjunct is supposed to be corn. So we came back and made a corn farmhouse. So it's got about like 20 to 25% flaked corn in it.
Okay.
And then we twisted Transmitter by using some Brettanomyces, so it's got like a crazy, funky earthiness. It's a mixed ferment.
Nice.
Okay.
So it's got both Saccharomyces normal beer yeast and Brett.
Wow.
So depending on how you think about
It's also 7% or 6.8%.
Oh, wow. There you go.
Stepping it up a little bit.
yeah. It stepped up in all sorts of ways, but
I would have never guessed where you derived your inspiration from on that beer. Never guessed it.
It comes from everywhere, It's,
yeah. I mean, it's
have to draw
inspiration is about like tasting something you like and
Right.
figuring out what you like about it, and then using that in a way that you think you can add to the conversation, essentially.
Yeah.
You know?
It's like what you get out of the
Sure.
experience.
Yeah.
All right.
Absolutely.
So besides your tasting room, where can we find Transmitter?
We like to say better beer bars and bottle shops across the city. Right now, we're distributed in 7 different states. Mostly bottles go out. But yeah, restaurants, beer bars.
You guys are up the East Coast now, right?
Yeah, Maine, Massachusetts, Rhode Island, Connecticut, upstate New York, New Jersey, Pennsylvania, and once in a while in Washington, D.C.
Oh, wow.
Okay.
So small drops,
Right.
small drops of beer, mostly bottles, but some kegs make it up that way as well. And yeah, our bottles have a very stable shelf life. So we have a different our business model is to go wide and shallow, essentially.
Okay.
So we just looking to be in the 10, 20, 30 best places in any given state. So we don't drop a lot of beer any place, but they all get a little bit of it, and it works well. Helps build the brand.
Kind of gives you guys a little bit of the advantage over the guys that are focusing on just on the IPAs, double IPAs. I mean, to be honest, those beers are not the same after 4 or 5 or so weeks. But
Right.
you guys get more longevity out of your beer.
Right.
Absolutely. Like I said, the last beer we have is
It's the best beer.
Yeah. We've had testing done on the bottles, and because of the bottle conditioning and the nature of bottle conditioning, there's almost no oxygen in it. So that's helping make them super stable out on the shelf.
Wow.
They can handle, some temperature fluctuations in the way that hop forward beers really don't handle
we don't
well.
have a cold chain that we care about.
Yeah.
So if you could kind of put it into words, what's Transmitter's philosophy on beer?
Make the beer you want to drink.
It's a beautiful thing.
Yeah.
I love it. I love it. It's a great thing. I mean, it's great when you can kind of start out really doing what you want to do, and then gradually people they gravitate to it, and people obviously are enjoying what you guys are doing. I mean, you guys are making really good beers. I mean, you guys were mentioned in a New York Times article, mentioned in Draft Magazine, I was Beer Advocate, all these guys. So, I mean, people obviously are taking notice, and obviously you guys are in 7 states too. So, yeah, I mean, it's a great life philosophy.
Yeah. So where can we find you online?
So transmitterbrewing.com.
There you go. Okay.
Transmitter Brewing on Instagram, Transmitter Brew on Twitter, and Transmitter Brewing on Facebook. But
Okay.
all that's on our website, transmitterbrewing.com.
And what are your hours of operation here?
So Fridays we're open 4 to 8, Saturdays 12 to 8, and then Sundays 12 to 6.
Okay. So I'm off this weekend. Let's
Yeah.
go.
Come by.
Come sit in the garden,
Come
have
by.
a beer.
Yeah.
So you guys open all for the whole weekend this weekend?
Yeah, we're closed on Monday.
Right.
We,
On a holiday.
yeah, we tend not to open on any holidays.
Yeah, we tend not to push holidays. Our hours are pretty curtailed, and that's been working for us. People, we do get calls for people that are in town on the Monday.
Oh,
and,
wow.
We all need a day off.
Everybody needs a day
Yeah.
off.
Yeah.
You got to recharge the batteries.
Exactly.
Well, guys, do you guys have any? This has been great. Do you guys have any parting thoughts for our audience? Any nuggets of wisdom?
Drink beer, have fun.
Yeah.
There you go.
Just remember, it's just beer. That's what we like to say.
There it is.
Awesome.
Pete, Justin, any parting words?
I enjoyed the beer. I think I like the F4. I think that was my favorite today, and I liked hearing about the arts and how your naming convention, because that's a bit different.
Keeps us sane.
Yeah.
Right.
Honestly, I said this last time when we were at Rockaway. This is actually even closer. I grew up 3 blocks away from here. So to come back to the neighborhood and see what's going on, you guys making great beer, and just the culture that's going on over here now is just amazing. And I'm just proud that I could say that I at least grew up here at some point. So
Cool.
Cool. Very cool.
That's
Well,
awesome.
Guys, thank you so much for
Thanks.
hosting Beer Today, Beer Tomorrow here, and we'll be back soon. Stay tuned. Take it
Cool.
easy, guys.
Thanks.
Thank
see
you.
ya.
Hey guys, we hope you enjoyed the show. BTBT is back next week with episode 29 featuring homebrew and hand grenades in Nassau County, Long Island. If you haven't yet, please subscribe to the podcast. You can find the podcast on our website at www.beertodaybeertomorrow.com, on Podbean, on iTunes, and now you can also find us on Stitcher, Google Play, and TuneIn. Don't forget to follow the Craft Beer Odyssey. Check us out on Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter. Tag us in your beer pics, hit us up, send us some messages, let us know what you think of the show. Until next time, no matter where you are in the world, drink local, drink fresh, repeat. Cheers.